Los Angeles is a city that never truly sleeps. Millions come here chasing dreams of fame, fortune, and a better life. The skyline glows beneath thousands of lights, while the Hollywood Hills watch silently over the city. But beyond the glamour lies Griffith Park, a place where darkness has its own secrets. Locals say that when the clock strikes midnight, strange whispers drift through the trees. Some hikers have reported hearing footsteps behind them, even when they were completely alone. Others claim they saw lights moving beneath the ground before vanishing forever. Most people laugh at those stories until they experience them. 28-year-old Ethan Brooks was a freelance photographer who loved exploring abandoned places. He believed every ghost story had a logical explanation. Late one evening, while editing photographs in his apartment, his phone vibrated. An unknown number had sent a single message: "Find the old stone tunnel beneath Griffith Park before midnight. Capture what no camera has ever seen." There was no name, no number to call back. Just those chilling words. Ethan smiled. Another urban legend, he thought. He grabbed his camera, packed extra batteries, picked up his flashlight, and headed into the night, completely unaware that his life was about to change forever. The city lights slowly disappeared behind him as Ethan walked deeper into Griffith Park. The trail was empty. A cold wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of damp earth and dead leaves. Thick fog crept across the ground, swallowing the path behind him. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Then everything became silent, too silent. Even the insects had stopped making noise. For the first time that night, Ethan felt as though someone was watching him. He turned his flashlight toward the trees. Nothing, only darkness. He kept walking. Nearly an hour later, Ethan noticed something strange. Behind a wall of tangled vines stood an ancient stone archway. It looked centuries old, completely out of place in the middle of the forest. Cold air flowed from the darkness beyond it. The entrance led to a narrow tunnel descending deep underground. Its stone walls were cracked and covered with moss, as though no human had entered for decades. Ethan raised his camera and took a photograph. The flash illuminated the tunnel for only a split second. In that brief moment, he thought he saw someone standing deep inside. When the darkness returned, the figure was gone. His heartbeat quickened. Still, curiosity pulled him forward. He stepped into the tunnel. The temperature dropped instantly. Every breath turned into white mist. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, echoing through the narrow passage. Ancient symbols covered the stone walls, carved so deeply they looked as though they had been scratched by desperate hands long ago. Ethan's flashlight flickered, once, twice, then, click, his camera shutter fired on its own. Confused, Ethan looked at the screen. His face turned pale. Standing only a few feet behind him was a woman dressed in a torn white gown. Her long black hair covered most of her face. Only her glowing white eyes were visible. Slowly, Ethan turned around. The tunnel behind him was empty. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing. Then, from somewhere deep inside the darkness, a whisper floated through the tunnel. "Ethan." He froze. A second whisper came even closer. "Don't leave." His flashlight began to flicker again. And this time, the darkness whispered back. Ethan's breathing became heavier as the whisper echoed through the tunnel. "Ethan." He tightened his grip on the flashlight and slowly turned around. At first, there was nothing. Then, a pale figure stepped out from the darkness. She wore a long, torn white dress that dragged across the wet stone floor. Her long black hair hid her face, but two glowing white eyes stared directly at him. She didn't walk, she glided silently toward him. Ethan stumbled backward in terror. His camera slipped from his shoulder, but before it hit the ground, the ghost vanished into the darkness as if she had never been there. Only the freezing air remained. Trying to calm himself, Ethan picked up his camera. His hands were shaking. He looked at the last photograph. The ghost was standing only a few inches behind him. Her face was clearer now. Her skin looked lifeless, and her mouth stretched into an unnatural smile. As Ethan stared at the image, the woman's eyes suddenly moved. She looked directly at him through the camera screen. The photograph changed, slowly. Her smile grew wider. Terrified, Ethan dropped the camera. When he picked it up again, the picture looked normal. But one thing had changed. The ghost was gone. Instead, someone who looked exactly like Ethan was standing behind him. The tunnel became completely silent. Then came another whisper. This time it wasn't calling his name. It simply said, "Stay." The flashlight began flashing on and off. Each time the light disappeared, Ethan heard footsteps moving closer. One step, another, another. When the light returned, nothing was there. But the footsteps continued. Now they sounded as though they were circling him. The darkness felt alive, watching, waiting, searching for another exit. Ethan followed the tunnel deeper underground. His flashlight illuminated the walls. He froze. Hundreds of pale handprints covered the stone from floor to ceiling. Some were small, like children's hands. Others were large enough to belong to grown adults. The prints looked fresh, as if they had been pressed onto the wall only moments ago. Without warning, a wet handprint slowly appeared in front of his eyes. No one was touching the wall. Yet another handprint appeared, then another. The tunnel echoed with soft scratching sounds. Something unseen was moving beside him. A child's laughter echoed through the darkness. Ethan swung his flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. Then another laugh came from behind him, followed by another. Soon dozens of children were laughing all around him. The beam of his flashlight swept across the tunnel. For a split second, small pale figures stood between the shadows. Their faces were emotionless. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. Then they disappeared. The laughter stopped. A chilling silence filled the tunnel once more. Suddenly, every child spoke together in one haunting voice. "He's waiting for you." Before Ethan could move, a powerful slam echoed through the tunnel. The passage behind him collapsed into darkness. There was no way back. The only path left led deeper beneath Griffith Park. Ethan's heart pounded as he ran deeper into the tunnel. His flashlight bounced wildly, throwing long shadows across the ancient walls. He reached a fork in the passage and turned left. Moments later, he stopped. The same cracked stone pillar stood before him. He had somehow returned to the exact place he had just left. "No, that's impossible," he whispered. He chose another tunnel and ran again. 5 minutes later, he arrived at the same pillar. The tunnel didn't want him to leave. It was trapping him. As panic took over, the whispers returned. "You're almost home." Determined to escape, Ethan pushed forward until the tunnel suddenly opened into a massive underground chamber. The room was unlike anything he had ever seen. Ancient stone pillars circled the chamber, their surfaces carved with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. In the center stood a giant black stone mirror, taller than any man. Its surface shimmered like still water. There was no dust on it, no cracks. It looked as though someone had been protecting it for centuries. As Ethan stepped closer, the whispers stopped. The silence was even more terrifying. Ethan stood before the mirror. At first, everything looked normal. Then he noticed something impossible. His reflection wasn't copying his movements. While Ethan stood frozen in fear, the figure inside the mirror slowly smiled. Ethan hadn't smiled. His reflection raised one hand. Ethan's hands remained at his sides. The smile stretched wider, wider than any human face could. Then the reflection whispered without opening its mouth, "I've been waiting for you." A crack spread across the mirror's surface. Not from the outside, from within. The mirror rippled like black water. A hand reached through the glass. Then another. Slowly, a figure stepped out. It looked exactly like Ethan. The same clothes, the same face, the same camera hanging from its shoulder. But its eyes were completely black. Its smile was impossibly wide. The creature tilted its head and spoke in Ethan's own voice. "Only one of us gets to leave." Without warning, it lunged forward. Ethan dodged just in time, crashing into one of the ancient pillars. The creature laughed. Its voice echoed through the chamber like dozens of voices speaking at once. Ethan grabbed his camera and instinctively pressed the flash button. A blinding burst of white light filled the chamber. The black-eyed creature screamed. Its skin cracked like shattered glass before dissolving into dark smoke. The moment the light faded, ghostly hands burst from the floor and walls. They clawed at Ethan's legs, trying to drag him toward the mirror. He kicked free and sprinted through a narrow passage on the far side of the chamber. Behind him, the creature's laughter echoed through the tunnels. "Run if you want. You'll always come back." Ethan didn't look back. He ran toward the only faint light he could see ahead, praying it was the way out. But deep inside, he feared the tunnel had already chosen his fate. Ethan ran with every ounce of strength he had left. His lungs burned, and every breath echoed through the narrow tunnel. Behind him, the laughter of the black-eyed creature grew louder. A faint silver light appeared ahead. Moonlight. He climbed a steep flight of ancient stone steps and burst through the tunnel entrance into the cold night air. He collapsed onto the forest floor, gasping for breath. The full moon hung above Griffith Park. His watch read exactly 12 a.m. After several minutes, Ethan gathered enough courage to look behind him. The tunnel was gone. Only a solid wall of rock stood where the entrance had been. It was as if the tunnel had never existed. Still shaken, Ethan picked up his camera. The battery should have been dead. Yet the screen suddenly lit up. One final photograph had appeared. It showed Ethan standing outside the tunnel. Behind him stood hundreds of pale figures. Men, women, children, all dressed in old, tattered clothing. Every one of them stared directly into the camera with glowing white eyes. Ethan spun around. The forest was empty. When he looked back at the camera, one figure had moved closer. It was the woman in the white dress. She was smiling. The next morning, Ethan never answered his phone. Friends visited his apartment. The front door was unlocked. His camera lay on the desk beside his computer. His backpack was still there. His car was parked outside. But Ethan had vanished without a trace. There were no signs of a struggle. No fingerprints. No footprints. Only silence. Police searched Griffith Park for weeks. They found nothing. Officially, Ethan Brooks became another missing person. Unofficially, the locals believed the tunnel had claimed another soul. When detectives examined Ethan's camera, they discovered one final image. It had been taken after his disappearance. The photograph showed the underground chamber. The giant black mirror stood exactly where Ethan had described it in his journal. Inside the mirror was Ethan. He was trapped behind the glass. His eyes were completely black. A wide, unnatural smile stretched across his face. Slowly, he raised one hand and pressed it against the inside of the mirror, as if begging someone to let him out. Behind him stood the ghost woman and hundreds of silent spirits, watching, waiting. Even today, hikers in Griffith Park tell the same story. On quiet nights, when thick fog covers the trails, they hear the faint click of a camera somewhere beneath the earth. Some claim they hear a frightened man whispering for help. Others say they have seen a pale woman standing at the edge of the trees before disappearing into the darkness. No one has ever found the hidden tunnel again. But the legend lives on. They say the mirror is still waiting for another visitor. Another face. Another soul. So if you ever find yourself walking through Griffith Park after midnight, and a voice softly whispers your name from the darkness, don't turn around, because the moment you answer, your reflection may be the one that walks away. The end. Please subscribe my channel for more horror videos. Stay tuned.